Find out more about all of the candidates in the Student Association election. We'll break down the New York State budget, and we'll take a look at the 2016 presidential election. All of that and more coming up on Talking Points. Good evening and welcome to Talking Points. I'm Max Darrow. Before we get the conversation started, let's go over this week's top headlines. New information is coming out about the shooting of an unarmed black man in South Carolina. Officer Michael Slager's dash cam video was just released. It shows Walter Scott running from his car after Officer Slager returned to his vehicle to check on Scott's claim that Scott had recently bought the car and didn't have registration information. I'll have more on that story later in the show. Last weekend, the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism released a report about Rolling Stone's controversial story about a rape at a fraternity at the University of Virginia. The report was not good. Rolling Stone redacted the story as a result of the report, and the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity in question is exploring legal action against Rolling Stone. And the Boston bomber has been convicted. The trial of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev came to an end this week. Tsarnaev was found guilty in the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing, which killed 3 people and injured 264 others. Tsarnaev and his brother carried out the attack. The jury will soon decide whether or not to give Tsarnaev the death penalty. And when we come back, find out all about the Student Association presidential candidates. You're watching Talking Points.
Tell him that I've begun to dream of things to come, and tell the trees not to look for me. I'm going to find some peace of mind. Wake the sun. Wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. God, no.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
The Student Association presidential election is just around the corner, and we've met with some of the candidates. Talking Points correspondent Caroline Strange is here to tell us a little bit more about their platforms.
Yes, Max, Student Association elections for president and vice president are quickly approaching, and there's only one candidate listed on the ballot. But several students are now running as write-in candidates for the 2 positions. In order for the election to count, at least 10% of the student body must vote, and in order for the votes to be counted for any of those write-ins, students will have to type in the names of both candidates. SA did say as long as members of the Board of Elections can tell the intent and come to an agreement on the names written, those votes will be counted. But if, for instance, a student only lists the vice presidential candidate, that vote won't be counted, even if they got the name right. The only candidates that will appear on MySlice's virtual ballot are Aisha Sadat and her running mate, Jane Hong. They were the first pair to announce they were running and the only official candidates recognized by SA. Their platform addresses support for students and issues of safety, such as sexual assault on campus. You can watch interviews with Sadat on our YouTube page, youtube.com/CitrusTV. And the first write-in candidates, AJ Abel and his running mate Jonathan Dawson, found out about the deadline to apply for SA president after it had already passed. They were running on a platform addressing an expansion of SA to assist more students, improving the relationship of students in the Department of Public Safety, and dealing with sexual assault and sexual violence on campus. For more on their platform, you can check out our last Talking Points for an interview with Abel, and you can also check out another interview on Citrus TV's SA Today. Now, Tatiana and her running mate Fatima Bangura were the second set of write-ins to announce they're running for SA President and Vice President. Tatiana was unable to be in studio for Talking Points, but you can see an interview with her on SA Today for March 31st. Her platform focuses on security, SA, and community, and in her interview with Topher Lane on SA, she said social media is a big part of her campaign. The third candidate to announce he's running as write-in candidate is Jesse Nichols. He's running alongside Moki Hine. Their main focus is on equality, togetherness, compassion, and dedication. For some of the ways they hope to improve wellness on campus is by creating a holistic stress reduction center and bringing more organic foods to the dining halls. Their Facebook page titled Om for SU, Vote for Jesse, and Moki Student Association. Lastly, the most recent addition to the list of write-ins is Safet Masanovic and Janae Olivia. Both are international students who say they want to represent all of SU students, something they say is not happening in SA right now. Max, back to you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. In-depth report. We'll find out more about election news coming up. The new budget for the New York State is here, and now we have Talking Points correspondent Hearns Laguerre Jr. with us in studio with the details of the new budget. Hearns?
Well, thank you, Max. There are many components to this year's New York State budget. The main points deal with issues such as landmark education reforms and investment, ethic reforms which include the nation's strongest and the most comprehensive disclosure laws for public officials with outside income, and the $5.4 billion investment in New York State economy. Now, for the fifth year in a row, the state budget spending growth has remained below 2% and continues a record of fiscal discipline that has helped with the decades of budgets that increase spending at a faster rate than personal income growth. The budget also addresses two of the most important issues that have troubled the state for a long time: education and ethics. When it comes to education, Governor Cuomo said in his address that the reforms will move New York to an education system that rewards results, addresses challenges, and demands accountability. Governor Cuomo also said that the budget continues to address ethical issues as it has in the last 4 years with steps and procedures ensuring less corruption dealing with finances. Now, the biggest reaction so far has come from Assemblyman Robert Oaks, who says the state budget missed an opportunity. He agrees that there should be more school aid and more funding, more for bridge and road repairs, but feels the budget ultimately failed to address mandate relief for local governments and doesn't provide tax relief for New Yorkers. But one of the biggest talking points deals with the $50 million transformation to the New York State Fairgrounds. Talking Points correspondent Abby Isaacs has information on how the money is being distributed.
Right now, the fairgrounds are pretty empty, but in less than 6 months, almost 1 million people will travel here for the state fair.
By the time the fair comes, so we're going to have the schematics and drawings of here's what the fair is going to look like and here's what we're going to build.
Acting director of the fairgrounds, Troy Waffner, says they will soon be starting a master plan and holding community sessions. Some ideas include a new midway, iceplex, and equine center.
The idea under the conceptual plan is all of this comes out and we build basically an iceplex somewhere in this area. The midway would get realigned and it would be a perfect rectangle.
One of the biggest plans for renovation is to move the RV parking lot that's inside of the racetrack to its own separate parking lot on the other side of the fairgrounds. This is because a lot of people come to the state fair to camp out, and they want to give these people a better space to enjoy the fair and hopefully attract more campers.
Waffner says they plan to have the RV park and midway complete by the 2016 fair and the rest of construction done by 2017.
It's going to look different than it's looked in 100 years. And I think that's the important part is most of our major buildings were being built 100 years ago. And no major money has been put into this fairgrounds in the last 80 years. So it's kind of an exciting time for us to really rebuild and remake the state fair.
Waffner says they are also setting aside money to renovate older buildings at the fair.
It'll benefit us during the fair, but the bigger benefit comes the other 50 weeks a year. We have shows every single weekend, and we hope to grow that in terms of revenue.
Governor Cuomo proposed the new budget to, quote, create a world-class entertainment and tourism destination.
The New York State Fair looks like the fair of yesterday, and he wants it to look like the fair of today and tomorrow.
So Abby, tell me, how can people get involved in the decision-making process?
So director of the fair, Troy Waffner, said that they're going to start holding community sessions as early as next month. So they'll hold these town hall meetings for, residents to come in and say what they want the money to be spent on and how they feel about the current plan right now.
So what can people expect at the fair this coming August?
So in August, there's not going to be any major changes that they can see, but the administration is going to put on an exhibit for people to go and see what the fair will look like in 2016 and then in 2017. So they're going to have 3D drawings and interactive things for people to see what it will look like. So the new Midway, the Iceplex, all of those things, people will be able to see how big they are, the special features. So it's going to be a really great thing for people to go and see at the fair this August.
So if there's any addition they told you about that you thought was the best one, what would you say it is?
I think the Iceplex is really exciting because there's not very many ice rinks in Syracuse. There's outdoor rinks during the winter, but especially during the summer, there's just really the one on campus, and so this big Iceplex will bring a lot more, they said, high schools and more tournaments to the area, which I love ice hockey, so I think it'll be a great addition to Syracuse.
Abby Isaacs, thanks so much. Coming up after the break, we'll take a look at the newest presidential candidate for the 2016 election. Don't go away.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
How you doing? My name's Steve. My family's lived in this neighborhood for years. Recently, things got so tight, we had to go to our local food bank for help. I lost a lot of sleep worrying about what the neighbors might think. That is until I saw them there, too. How'd I do, Steve?
A little stiff. You could have done a little better.
What? Come on. I have an Academy Award.
Yeah, but not for playing me.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
Hey, my name's Katie and I'm in the 9th grade. I'm an A average student and I'm an athlete working towards a scholarship. And everybody tells me how much potential I have. But I just wish someone would tell me where my next meal is coming from. Katie, how'd I do?
Do you have to be so serious?
Well, I mean, I did like a crazy dance in a movie if you want me to do a little, no.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
Ted Cruz is no longer the only presidential candidate running in the 2016 election. Rand Paul just announced his decision to run this week. Here's Talking Points correspondent Topher Lane.
I have a message. A message that is loud and clear and does not mince words. We've come to take our country back. Today, I announce with God's help, with the help of liberty lovers everywhere, that I am putting myself forward as a candidate for President of the United States of America.
While the Tea Party is vying for the presidential bid this 2016 election, Rand Paul, the son of 2012 Republican primary candidate Ron Paul, has announced his candidacy for the upcoming elections. Rand follows in his father's footsteps as a libertarian. Elected in the Senate in 2010, Paul represents the state of Kentucky. His climb to national prominence, though, comes from his willingness to fight other Republicans. After his announcement speech, Paul headed to New Hampshire. He headed to South Carolina, Iowa, and Nevada to begin his campaigning.
So Topher, what are some of Rand Paul's campaign platform issues?
Well, one of the biggest things that he's got right now, it's plastered everywhere on his websites, Rand Paul 2016, all of his websites, is defeat the Washington machine to unleash the American dream.
So when he says defeat the Washington machine, what does he mean by that?
Well, it definitely sticks to his libertarian values, which his father kind of bestowed on him, of that, the government is not supposed to really be interfering much with the American people and really intervene with how they work as a people. So the American dream, he feels, is being kind of cast in, locked in by the government, and that it's unable to attain now because the government is interfering so much. So this sticks towards his libertarian values, which he really hopes that if he comes to be president, that he can kind of focus on pulling back and letting people attain the American dream.
So you're talking about his libertarian values. You mentioned his father, Ron Paul. How does he compare to his father? Obviously, you just mentioned a little bit, but elaborate a little more.
Well, Ron Paul was definitely a staunch libertarian, really stuck to the core values of being libertarian. Rand has strayed away from that more. He still stands strongly in line with libertarian values. He doesn't really believe in much foreign policy, and it's a very interesting way of looking at foreign policy, but he wants to stick more with the United States rather than go outside of the country. But in terms of how he relates to his father, it's tough to say that he's really stuck with what his father has done. He's been more of a fighter within the Senate. You know, he's gone up against Chris Christie and other Republicans, which has really brought him towards more national prominence.
So you're mentioning other Republicans. Ted Cruz is the only other Republican who's declared so far. How do you think he fares against Cruz?
Well, obviously there are more people who are going to come into the campaign, but if it were between just Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, I feel like Rand Paul would come out of that, because not necessarily in his own policies, but Ted Cruz's policies are pretty extreme, and I think that Republican voters would be more inclined to vote for Rand Paul, who's almost more moderate, but in a different sense. They've got a very different extremist view on the Republican side.
So what's happened in his campaign so far?
Well, he went off to 4 states across the country to start his campaigning, and then he went on the Today Show, where he got in a very heated debate with Savannah Guthrie about how she was leading him on with these questions, and it was a really interesting fight that they had.
Do you think that's going to affect his campaign moving forward?
I think that right now that's showing that maybe the pressure of these interviews is already getting to him, which, considering it's only a couple days into his campaign, that seems like that might be kind of tough, because there are debates. I mean, the Republican primary is a boxing match. It'll be incredibly tough over the next couple months as more people come in, and they all really are fighting neck and neck with that presidential bid.
So do you think the candidate who will win the Republican nomination will be one who doesn't have kind of a snap like we saw Cruz have, like we've seen Rand Paul have already?
I think it'll be interesting. I think that you need someone more moderate on the Republic. I think Republicans are obviously looking for someone more moderate so that they can get a chance at the White House. But it's tough because, you know, you have so many people fighting for it. Jeb Bush is definitely projected to come out pretty highly. Chris Christie could run, and he could pose a threat because he's so moderate. But these guys who are all going to go through, the snap might help or hurt them in a lot of ways.
Topher Lane, thank you so much. You've probably been hearing a lot about a nuclear deal with Iran, but may be wondering what exactly that means. Talking Points correspondent Ray Merrick joins us now to break it down for us. Ray, good evening.
Hi, Mike.
So what are the most recent gains in these negotiations?
There's 3 major things that are happening right now. The first thing that I would go with is Iran is reducing its installed enrichment centrifuges, which are basically help the uranium, concentrate the uranium, which is used in the bomb making. And they are going down, the machines are going down from 19,000 to 6,000, which is a pretty significant drop. Secondly, Fordow, which is the second largest enrichment facility in Iran, is actually going to be done away with. It's going to be stopped and useless, pretty much, essentially, for 15 years. And that's really significant because of Fordow's location, which was way up in the mountains, so it was essentially almost impossible, impenetrable for airstrikes. And lastly, Iran has agreed to reduce its uranium stockpile, which was something it didn't want to do before, which is a big change.
So we've talked about the gains. Now, what needs to be resolved?
The biggest thing that needs to be resolved right now is inspection practices. And what I mean by that is there's something called the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency. And the IAEA has had experience with Iran. They've actually been deceived by Iran. Iran had been hiding a part of its facilities where they were making nuclear bombs.
That was about 2 years ago, correct?
That was correct, about 2 years ago. And now the main difference is that they have more power with this new nuclear deal. If the facilities, they are allowed to inspect or monitor facilities that they deem suspicious. How you determine that needs to be decided when we move forward with this nuclear talks.
How will these negotiations impact the rest of the Middle East?
They will probably impact the Middle East in a big way, actually. We already have heard about Israel and how they have spoken out against it. But another big country is Saudi Arabia. The thing going on with Saudi Arabia is Iran is the threat to them when you talk about the sanctions being withdrawn, meaning that Iran will have more economic stability, and Saudi Arabia thinks in 15 years, and that's how long the nuclear deals we'll talk about, they don't believe that's long enough, and they think Iran will be economically stable and will be able to still have nuclear resources after those 15 years are up.
So if a deal is agreed upon and signed, how will this affect future domestic politics in the United States?
Well, we can talk about two major parts. The first big part is President Obama's legacy, which we all love to talk about. You can talk about initially Obamacare. Everyone, these big things that President Obama is focusing on, it's either going to be a hit or miss. And every politician, when they are doing their candidacy coming up in 2016, they're going to have to take a position, and it'll either be a success or failure for Obama.
So finally, what is most likely to be the biggest hurdle to signing a complete deal before that July 1st deadline?
Well, like I mentioned it before, trust is always big with Iran. And the United Nations and the Obama administration can't really ever trust Iran because they've betrayed them before and they're not an ally, obviously. But if they're able to, if they're able to monitor and to control and to know what Iran is up to, then I think it's possible that a nuclear deal will be successful.
Ray, thank you so much. Talking Points, we'll be right back.
I make learning a privilege, not a chore, and frustration
I gotta go over
tool,
there. Good work, man.
not an obstacle. I make working hard seem easy and giving up impossible. I make an old subject feel like a fresh thought and unconventional methods common. I'm a teacher. I make more.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Pretty much a good day for me would be people leaving their hands off of me. I'm always called names. Everywhere that I go, there's always someone calling me names, calling me gay. I've been choked, thrown up against a wall, punched. Nobody's ever tried to help me.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
2 astronauts have begun a year-long mission in space. To talk a little bit more about the mission, here's Talking Points science correspondent Sawyer Rosenstein. Sawyer, good evening.
Good evening.
So why are they doing this?
Well, it's a really interesting mission because it's 2 astronauts, American astronaut Scott Kelly and Russian cosmonaut Mikhail Kornienko. They're doing this because NASA's eventual goal is to move on to Mars and to move outward into the solar system and to keep exploring beyond what we've done now, which is low Earth orbit for the last 30 years. Well, to get to Mars round trip, we're talking about 2 to 3 years. And we only know about how the human body reacts in space for about 6 months. Because right now we have people living aboard the International Space Station. There have been people living on there continuously for 15 years now. And they're up there for about 3 to 6 months at a time. So we have a decent understanding, but if we're going to go on long duration missions, we have to extend our presence in space and see how the human body reacts.
So is that what we're trying to learn out of this, or is there another goal they're trying to get out of it?
Well, the main thing is, how is the human body going to change? Because we know that it changes while you're in space. For example, your eyes, the shape of your eye actually changes while you're in space. About 30% of astronauts experience that. The bacteria inside your gut changes. It's little things like that, but at the same time, if you're going on a year-long mission, you're also going to be in a confined space for a long period of time, and there's also mental health concerns.
Talk to me a little bit more about the mental health concerns. What do the astronauts have to do to keep up with people at home? How do they even stay in touch?
Well, just recently they got the internet a few years ago, so that helps. So they can, keep in touch with the internet. In fact, Scott Kelly at Station Commander Kelly on Twitter is tweeting, and he's posting pictures to Instagram, so that helps. But they also have phone calls that they can make every day to home, and they get a video call once a week. And in terms of the space that they're in, I mean, it's a pretty decent size. The ISS is about the size of an American football field. So it's not like they're cramped, but at the same time, you can't step outside for fresh air because, there is no air.
Sawyer Rosenstein, awesome as always. Thank you. 147 people were killed in a terrorist attack in Kenya last week. Talking Points correspondent Tom Beckley is in studio now to talk more about the group that is responsible.
Al-Shabaab, which in Arabic means the youth or the youngsters, is a group of Islamic militants based in Somalia. Al-Shabaab is a terrorist organization. It was labeled as a terrorist organization by the United States in 2008 and officially has been affiliated since Al-Qaeda since 2012. And it's become notorious in recent years for high-profile attacks on civilians, such as last week's massacre at a college in Garissa, Kenya, where militants rounded up and shot nearly 150 Christian students, as well as the September 2013 attack on the Westgate Mall in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, which killed 68 people, some of them women and children. It's these kinds of attacks, along with others in Uganda, Djibouti, and Somalia, that have gained Shabaab a fearsome reputation as they have lost ground in their own country. Al-Shabaab has roots in an organization called the Islamic Courts Union, which controlled much of southern Somalia in 2006 as it was fighting a civil war against the Somalian federal government and the Ethiopian occupying force at the time. Al-Shabaab was originally a youth militia wing of that ICU organization and became known for hardline nationalist sentiments against the Ethiopians. However, as the ICU crumbled and dissolved over the next few years, Al-Shabaab broke off, transitioning into a terrorist group committed to jihad, and its membership shot from the hundreds into the thousands. Since then, Al-Shabaab has maintained control over patches of Somalian territory, at times controlling the capital of Mogadishu, as well as the profitable port city of Kismayo. In recent years, however, hardened troops from the Somalian federal government and AMISOM, the African Union mission to Somalia, have largely eroded Al-Shabaab's territorial claims. Al-Shabaab, in fact, justifies its bloody attacks in neighboring countries, such as Kenya and Uganda, as retribution against those countries who have given troops to AMISOM. Still, the group's operation, which range from acts of terror like suicide bombings to illegal profit schemes like extortion and smuggling, have largely continued, and many say the group has now splintered into a collection of small but deadly terror cells, rather than a large unified force. Back to you.
Thanks, Tom. Now it's time for our final opinion segment of the night. If it weren't for Phaedon Santana, the man who captured the video of a white police officer shooting a black man 8 times in the back, there's a good chance Officer Michael Slager would still be doing his job. His video captured every moment of the shooting, from Walter Scott turning his back to Slager and running, to Slager handcuffing his limp body, to more officers showing up to find out what happened. Officer Slager was charged with the murder of Walter Scott on Tuesday. However, it wasn't until Santana read the police report and saw what happened on the news that he sent his footage to Scott's family. This is yet another instance of a white police officer killing a black person caught on video. I'd love to say that Officer Slager will be found guilty, but frankly, I can't say he will with 100% confidence with how the other events have unfolded. To me, this is a perfect reason for police officers to be required to wear body cameras. If Santana hadn't recorded this video, who knows what would have happened. Slager could still be enforcing the law in the streets of Charleston. However, North Charleston will be taking a step forward because of the event. Mayor Keith Summey announced all officers will be required to wear body cameras after a policy is established. Body cameras are something that should be utilized by police throughout the country. And it's not purely a racial issue at that. There are many instances when they would be important. Recording conversations between police officers and civilians that could be used in a court of law is one, instead of playing the my word against the police officer's word, where the police officer's word is almost always held in a higher regard. Body cameras will change the way some police officers will act, and they will help protect both police officers and civilians. It's only a question of when it will happen, and will it happen before another tragic incident like this one happens again. That's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you for watching Talking Points. You can check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Go to our blog for more Talking Points content. I'm Max Darrow. Have a great night, Syracuse.